Okay, so Ross chapter 20, this has to do with the volitional conjugations, okay? So we're dealing with volitional verb forms. Let's talk about that word there for just a second. If a verb is volitional, it's trying to accomplish something. We've got the word volition. If I say that somebody does something of their own volition, what does that mean? It means that they've done it of their own will, right? And so volition has to do with somebody willing or desiring something. Okay? And so that's what these verbs are that we're talking about in this chapter. They are verbs that indicate the speaker's will. That's whose will is in view. It's the will or the desire of the speaker. In Hebrew, we have three different kinds of volitional forms. What are they? We have cohortatives. We have imperatives. And thirdly, we have jussives. And what I want to do is lay out the persons that we're talking about when we deal with cohortatives, imperatives, and jussives. First of all, when we are dealing with cohortatives, these are generally understood as first-person forms. Imperatives are second person. Jussives generally are third-person forms. Okay? And people have said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so what I want to do is I want to draw a couple of pictures for you to illustrate the conceptual differences among these forms. In all of these situations, I'm going to draw pictures here. There is a speaker addressing a you, okay? Whose will is involved with these volitional forms? The speaker's will, okay? The speaker wants something to happen. So cohortatives are first-person forms where the speaker's will is directed toward the speaker doing something. That is to say, the one that the speaker wants to act is the speaker himself. And so the volitional verb form will be an I, okay? And if it's plural, it'll be we, the speaker and those with the speaker. And so typically, we're going to see cohortatives translated as something like, let me blank, for whatever the verb is, or may I blank. And then for all of these singular forms, just realize you could use the plural we. So let us do such and such, or may we do such and such. And then sometimes the cohortative could also be translated with a very strong sense of will, as in, I will do this, as an assertion of my desire. Somebody says something like, Billy, I forbid you to go to the Super Bowl. And Billy looks with a resolution and says, no, I will go to the Super Bowl. Okay? That's not merely a futuristic prediction. It is an assertion of my strong will for it. Okay? So, and that's different than just using the imperfect for something. Now, in the second scenario where we have imperatives, we're dealing with second-person verb forms. And here's why. The speaker is expressing the speaker's will that the you in the discourse situation is the one who does the acting or does the verb. Okay? So wherever the arrow ends is who's supposed to perform the action. Where the arrow begins is the willer for the action to happen. So up in cohortatives, the speaker is the one who wills, and the one who's supposed to do what the speaker wills is the speaker himself. Let me go to the store. I want going to the store to happen, and I want me to go to the store. On the other hand, if I want the you to go to the store, I'm the speaker and I'm still willing it, but you're supposed to carry out the action. So it might be something like, go. Right? In English, we use imperatives where we don't put the pronoun there, but we put the bare verb form there. Go. Eat, as in eat more chicken. Okay? Now, the you who is supposed to carry out the action could be one you, or it could be plural you. Right? So I can command one you to do something, or I could command a group of you to do something. Now let's take a look at how conceptually justives work. Okay, if you look at my drawing here, the speaker is talking to a you in the situation, but the speaker's will is that for not the you to do something and not for the speaker to do something, but for someone outside of the I and the you to do something. And we might translate that as let them blank, or may they blank. So the speaker wills it, but the one that the speaker wills to act is a third person entity. And it could be singular or plural. I happen to have two people here, so I'm using plural. But if it were one person, I could say, may he go to the store. And what I'm saying is I will for him to go. All right? May God bless you. What am I doing when I say that? That's adjussive. I will something to happen, but what I'm willing is that God do something for you, right? May God bless you. And I would use a third person adjussive for that. All right, so does that make sense? Yes. So these are how our volitional forms are going to work typically. One thing that is just a little bit of a fly in the ointment is that, so you can see we're moving from first to second to third person. Let me just put in parentheses here. There are some second person adjussives where you're expressing your will that some you do something, and we're going to talk about when second person adjussives occur. But generally speaking, when you think of adjussives, you should be thinking third person. So when it comes to forming these volitional verb forms, we want to look at the handout here and see how to do it. So let's look at the handout now. So volitional verb forms are those in which the speaker projects his or her will about the performance of an action, and the speaker's will is that some first-person agent do something, some second-person agent do something, or some third-person agent do something. To indicate one's will concerning a second-person agent, a you, the writer generally employs the imperative forms. To indicate one's will concerning a third-person agent, the writer generally employs the adjussive forms. And to indicate one's will concerning a first-person agent, the writer generally employs the cohortative forms. And so we're going to walk through these forms. I'm going to start with the imperative here, simply because it's the simplest one, presumably. And what I want you to do is to commit to memory this chart and the actual forms of the cal imperative we're going to see. But what you're looking at here is just boxes that represent the three verbal root letters of any triradical or verb form in the Hebrew language, and the personal endings that are used. And this chart will apply to not just the cal imperatives, but it'll apply to the other stems imperatives when we get to the nifal stem and the pl stem. All of this will also apply. And here's the deal with the imperative. We had mentioned that the imperatives are second person. You're directing a you, singular or plural, to act. And therefore, we're going to see some familiar second person forms to indicate that imperative idea. What we're doing is for the imperative, the cohortative, and the adjussives, we are going to use the prefix conjugation, okay? So volitional verbs are based on the prefix conjugation, the conjugation that I associate with the imperfect, okay? But here's the deal with the imperative. The imperative is basically all of the second person prefix conjugation forms minus the prefix, okay? I'm going to give this handout to you. It's actually available on my website already. But I've got the entirety of the verbal system in little box forms like this, where just the inflectional markings, the prefixes and the suffixes of the different conjugation patterns are indicated here. And here is here's the money takeaway, okay? This may be a little bit hard to see, but I got to shrink it a little bit. The imperative forms, which are right here, these are identical to the imperfect's second person forms, except for one thing. What is it? That's right. There's no prefixing. All of the prefixes are gone. Well, I like to refer to this as chopping off the head, right? Because this is the front of the verb form. In imperatives, you're chopping off the head. You're chopping off the imperfect's nutty prefix. Okay, so these are going to be removed. But the suffixes of the second person imperfects are going to be present. And that is how you form the imperative. You basically take the second person imperfects, chop off the head, chop off the prefix, and you've got your imperative form to say, you, hey you, do this, as opposed to you will do this. Okay? So let's go back to the forms on the hand. So take a look at the imperative form for how to say visit or appoint. Okay? My imperfect of pakad would look like this. Tif code. That would be the imperfect to a mess. How do I form the imperative? I take the prefix and I chop off the head, right? What am I left with? I'm left with a pei with a shava under it. Can that be a silent shava anymore? Nope. It's got to be vocal. And if it's a begat kafet letter, since there's no vowel before it, what will it get? It'll get a dagesh lene. So the imperative form ends up being pakod. So tif code, chop off the ti, and I'm left with pakod. Okay? So that's my form here. 2ms, pakod. Now, when I add the 2fs, okay, let me just start with pakod as the basic form here. Pakod. And let's add a kirik yod to the end of it. Notice that I have a holum in the basic form, pakod. Add the kirik yod. Is the dalet going to close the syllable anymore? Nope. He's going to slide over and take the vowel, right? Start a new syllable. And is this a vocalic ending, the kirik yod? Yes, it's a vowel, so it's vocalic. And what's it going to do to the stress? It's going to pull the stress to the back. Now the ko is open and pretonic. And what do Hebrew verbs do with open pretonic syllables? They reduce to a vocal shava. Okay? And so pakodi becomes pakdi. Now I've got a problem here. Got a vocal shava under the pei? Got a vocal shava under the kof? What is going to happen here? You know the answer, don't you? We are going to break out the Red Ryder BB gun, shoot out one eye, and what will happen to the vocal shava after he commits this heinous sin? It will become silent. Okay? So it becomes pikdi. Pikdi. So pakod, then pikdi for you, woman. Appoint. So appoint, man. Appoint, woman. I'm going to add the shurik to the end of pakod for the 2MP. So it's going to also do the same thing. Pikdu. And then when I add the na ending right? Because my 2FP form would be tifkodna. Tifkodna, I chop off the ti, and I'm left with pakodna. I don't have to reduce any vowels because na is not a vocalic ending, it's a consonantal ending. So it's going to look just like tifkodna, just missing the ti part. Okay? So those are the forms. Let me read them. Okay? Pakod, pikdi, pikdu, pakodna. All of them are going to be translated as commands. Appoint. And whenever I translate an imperative in my homework answer keys, I typically put an exclamation point just as a way of emphasizing the fact that this is a command. It's an imperative, all right? That doesn't mean you have to do that. It's just my way of indicating, look, you're looking at an imperative here. Let's look at the jussive. Remember, the jussives are which person typically? Third person. And that's because I'm going to use them to tell some third person entity that I want that third person entity to act or to do something. All right, so look at the personal inflectional markings here. The forms have the nutty prefixes that I've learned for the imperfect and the suffixes that I've learned for the imperfect third person forms. In other words, guess what? My jussives are going to be identical to my imperfect third person forms. Nothing new here. Same vowel pointings when I actually look at the cal jussive. It's going to look just like the cal imperfect. And as I mentioned, we will typically see the jussives translated as let him or her do something, or may he or she do something, or if it's plural, let them or may they do such and such. Okay? So let's take a look at the forms here. So yifkod would be let him appoint. Tifkod, let her appoint, or may she appoint. Yifkadu, let them or may they appoint. And tifkodna, let them women or may they women appoint. Okay? So I'm expressing my will that he, she, or they do some action. And all these forms are identical to the imperfect third person forms you've already learned. So nothing new here. All right. When we get to certain weak verbs, we'll be able to tell the difference between the jussive forms and the imperfect forms. But for now, they're all going to look the same. And then last, my cohortatives are when the speaker wishes or wills that the speaker himself or the speaker and his associates do something. And so these are first-person forms. The speaker wills a first-person entity to do something. Well, I only have two first-person forms in the cal imperfect, don't I? And they both have nutty prefixes, prefix aleph and prefix nun, indicating first common singular versus first common plural. So that is normal. You've already seen those. What is not normal is the ending. The cohortative, in addition to the aleph prefix or the nun prefix, gets an additional suffix that is not in the cal imperfect first person. And that is a comatase ending. Okay? It's a comatase ending. So, what will those look like here? Let's just take a quick look at the paradigm. The cal imperfect of pakad is, for first common singular, is F code. Okay? So notice that the first common singular looks almost like that for the cohortative, except because I add the comatase, which is a vowel, this holum has to reduce to a vocal shava. Okay? Holum reduced to a vocal shava. F code, F koda becomes F kada. Okay? And the same thing here for the first common plural. Nif code is my cal imperfect 1CP, and I just add a comatase to it, and nif code becomes nif kada. This is let me or may I appoint. This is let us or may we appoint. So those are the cohortative forms. So if you ever see first-person prefixes and a comatase attached to the end, that's cohortative. Okay, So those are the forms. Let me just look at this little paragraph with you here. Okay, the cohortative forms will use the normal prefixes in the first person imperfect, but it will include a comet, hey suffix. That is really the most important part there. That's not found on the first common singular or first common plural imperfect. Since we're here dealing with prefix forms, this suffix should not be confused with the third feminine singular suffix on perfect verbs. This comet hey on the cohortative forms is related to the comet hey we find on the alternate cal imperative 2ms form poke da, which is right. Now, we didn't actually talk about this when we looked at the imperative, so let me just go back up here and take a look with over here, I should put in parentheses, and I want you to do it right now, that there is an alternative cal imperative 2ms form that is going to look like this. Poke da. Okay, this is a comet katuf here. Okay, so that's pronounced poke da, poke da. So pukode, appoint you man, or alternately poke da, with a comet hey ending. Now remember, okay, and this is really important. When we're thinking about the fact that the imperatives, justives, and cohortatives are built off of the imperfect verbal system, when you look at imperfect verbs, let's see, we'll take a look at the strong verb paradigm. Let me go back over here. In the imperfect conjugation, do you ever have a comet hey suffix for your imperfect conjugation verb pattern? Look at your personal endings and prefixes here.
When it's attached to a noun, that's it.
What's that?
If it's attached to a noun.
That's right. And then the ending is not comet hey, right? It's noon comet hey. So there are no comet hey suffixes in the imperfect conjugation at all in this whole thing. All right? And so when you're dealing with the imperatives and the cohortatives for that matter, when you see I went to the wrong place here. Hold on a second. There it is. Oh, wrong one. Need to go here. There we are. Okay. So when you see this comet hey ending on an imperative, knowing that the imperative is built off of the system of the imperfect forms, you should never think of that comet hey as marking anything feminine, because that's not what comet heys do in the imperfect, because there are no comet heys in the imperfect. In the imperfect system, this extra comet hey is actually marking a form as volitional. Okay? So this is just an alternate imperative volitional form for the 2ms. You, man, poke da, appoint. And so when we find that comet hey on the cohortatives down here at the end, then again, that's just making these first-person imperfect forms volitional. Okay? I'm projecting, as the speaker, my will about what a first-person agent, I or we, should do. Okay? So that's how to form the volitional verbs.